Hello, everybody. It's Wintermute coming to you from the Think Tank. And today is going to be the first video of a series called Tech Talk, where I want to kind of talk about the technology in a little bit more in depth. And this first video is just going to be kind of talking about technology in general, and talking about some aspects of the text that you can get and whatnot. And then what I want to do is I want to kind of talk about each nation and what technologies are kind of the ideal for them, what works for them, what you're probably not going to bother with this nation doesn't need this, and this nation really benefits from this. Excuse me, and stuff kind of like that for each nation. But we're going to start off kind of just looking at the basic list of technology. And I kind of break this list into two different mental categories. The immediate benefit and then the deferred benefit. And the immediate benefit are ones that take effect right away. So like long-range aircraft, excuse me, advanced ASW, radar, wartime economy, things like that. Basically, the turn you get them, you get the bonus right away. And then the deferred bonus is, or the deferred advantage is the ones where you get the tech, but then you have to build the tech. So there can be kind of a slight delay in putting it into effect. Now, you can roll for your tech and then build it that turn. So if you get heavy armor, you can build it that same turn. But then because but it doesn't actually go into play until the end of that turn, and then the following turn is where it's most likely going to actually see action, unless you build it in a place that the enemy attacks on their turn, as opposed to like long range aircraft, which you get it and you get the bonus that turn. You can just start getting that extra movement right away. So with that said, we're going to just kind of go right down the list. Advanced artillery, it's a solid one if you're going to be doing a lot of land-based combat. The better stats are good. I mean, you go up to a 33% chance to hit with your first strike. That's from a 25% chance. That's pretty good. The attrition aspect of it isn't bad if you're locked in a stalemate with a certain territory. The most likely place I see that being kind of useful is if you're kind of building up a force around a city to actually attack it, while you're waiting to attack it, which may be a couple turns depending on how the buildup goes. You go ahead and you roll those attrition rolls to see if you can't wear them down. But it's not likely to hit, so I wouldn't rely on that. But it's a nice thing to be able to do if your artillery just doesn't have anything else to do for that turn. Advanced mech, pretty good, good stats, and again, it only costs 4. The price doesn't go up, but it only costs 4 for a 4/5 movement of 2. Pretty good. Heavy armor, not bad. The cost is 8, so that's only actually let me double check something. Some of these costs have changed a little bit, so I have to double check sometimes. So basically, medium armor is a 6/5, and then for one more IPP, you go to an 8/7, which is a cost-effective upgrade. So that's not terrible, and then you get the target selection of 1. Again, don't expect that to hit very often, but it's nice when it does. Jet fighters, they're pretty solid as well. Compared to regular fighters, they go up another. Now they're a little different. Their cost compared to a regular fighter goes up by 2, and their attack defense goes up by 2. But then their intercept value goes up by 2 as well. So it's a little more expensive of a bonus to its stats compared to like the heavy armor, but it's you got to look at some of the other aspects to it and how that works. And so that I still think that's pretty good. Heavy strategic bombers, their cost compared to a regular strategic bomber actually doesn't go up at all. Or I'm sorry, no, it does go up one. Actually, I need to fix that. I put the cost at 12. I need to put it at 13. It goes up by one, but then obviously you get a slightly better attack and defense when, or defense value when you're for interception. Your carpet bombing becomes 5 dice, and then your strategic bombing becomes 3d6. A little more. What's the word I'm looking for? It's a little more as far as upgrades go and bonuses. They're good. They're good bonuses. It's a solid increase, but how often do you build strategic bombers during the game is kind of really going to dictate whether you're going to get that one or not. Long range aircraft. Now this is one that it takes effect right away, and it's good all around so long as you've got a heavy aircraft kind of. Military. There's nothing. None of these are terrible. Let me put it that way. Advanced submarines become much harder to kill and much better at convoy rating, and their cost compared to a normal submarine is where did I put that? Yeah, normal submarine is 6, so their cost only goes up 1, but then they become much harder to kill. And of course, their base stats go up as well. Advanced anti-submarine warfare. Obviously, if you're expecting to get if you've got a lot of routes to defend, then that's not terrible. Strategic rockets. Now, this is a really interesting one. They have a range of 3. They can carpet bomb 1 die at it and hit on a 2. And then they can strategic bomb at 1d6. Now, in my personal opinion, the strategic bombing is the sure thing. That's what's really going to pay off with these strategic rockets. And the reason I say that is because let's say you actually get a hit on a carpet bombing. It's a low hit chance. Well, let's say you get a hit. Let's say your opponent doesn't have any militia, so he has to lose an infantry. So he'll just lose an infantry. You just did 3 damage to him. Basically, you cost him 3 IPP. But your strategic bombing is automatically going to hit so long as there's a target within range. They can't intercept it. They can't stop it. There's no attack roll. So it's automatically going to do 1 IPP, possibly more if you roll an average of 3. So if you roll a 3 on the strategic bombing against their factory, assuming it's a factory or a facility that they care about, need to replace or repair, it's automatically cost them 3 IPP. Versus a long shot of dealing 3 IPP to them losing an infantry unit. And, odds are they'll build a militia or 2, and then they'll just lose 2 IPP. Now, in a pure economic exchange, I think strategic bombing makes more sense to use strategic rockets in that sense. However, I could see kind of massing them up and using a carpet bombing as a way of softening them up before an assault. If you got 3 or 4 that can reach that territory and you're going to attack it, well, it may make more sense to go ahead and roll those dice and hopefully have them lose a unit or 2 before you attack it with your ground units. But I mean, I like the way the strategic rockets work in this version. I think that they have their place in the overall strategies. So then we have radar. Obviously, you can scramble unlimited number of fighters. Fighters gain plus 1 interception, and it helps with your escort ships. And their escort modifier roll. So this, with advanced submarine warfare, really kind of make life very difficult for the Germans or the Japanese if they're going heavy on the convoy rating. Wartime economy. Wartime economy is just solid all around. The only nation I can think of that may kind of shrug about it is like America. I can't imagine any other nation being disappointed that they got wartime economy. Now, of course, it's some turns you're going to roll a 2, some turns you're going to roll a 12. and it may really suck that you roll the 2 when you could have really used the 12. But on average, you're going to roll a 7. That's how it averages out to. So when you get the wartime economy buff, you can average out that you're going to get about 7 IPP more a turn. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. And like I said, there's no nation that is going to scoff at that. Improved factories, really solid. And I think that there are definitely some nations that really, really, really benefit from this. And I'll go more into, when I talk about each specific nation, I'll go into individually why I think some of these techs are good or not so good for those nations. So I'll save that for later. But being able to start producing 2 units per turn instead of 1, and then 5 instead of 3 at the mediums and things like that. Mainly the real big bonus is this minor factory. Basically, you're doubling their output. And some nations either get or want to build minor factories closer to where the action is. And being able to double the amount of units you can output a turn at those factories is pretty good. Pretty good. And then you've got improved construction. All facilities and ships cost minus 1 IPP per cycle. That's all facilities in addition to ships. That's a huge discount. Basically, some of the facilities that you can build with their base cost, because some of these costs are really inexpensive in this version. So seaplane base only costs 1. Submarine base only costs 1. You might want to get that tech and then just dot the board with submarine bases as a perfectly reasonable strategy for letting your subs just, go wherever they want, whenever they want. Even some of this other stuff, major dockyard, major shipyard, basically that only becomes a 3-3, that becomes a 4-4. A air base becomes a 2-2, so it costs a total of 4. That's a really good discount. And that right there alone almost makes improved construction worth it. But then you have all this other bonuses for the ships. And then you even get the same minor shipyards and major shipyards start producing more units. And then on top of that, being able, instead of saving the 1 IP per cycle, a player may pay the first 2 constructions turn at the same time. Thus, a facility that costs 5.55 would be built for 10.5. This is now, as far as I can read, there's no limit to this. So let's say you're America, and I'll just use this as a specific example. You go ahead and get one of those techs that you have to build into right away, like a heavy carrier. They have the money. They can just double up and start knocking out heavy carriers all that sooner if they have improved construction. So again, unless you're a landlocked nation, you won't get as much benefit out of this. But then again, even some of the landlocked nations, just reducing the cost of your facilities may be very much worth it, depending on what your overall strategy is and what you're trying to do. So don't forget that. Don't look at this and just go, well, this is purely for naval stuff. Nope, it's just naval and facilities. So keep that in mind when you're looking at improved construction. And then you've got heavy battleship. Heavy battleships, they're basically regular battleships, but they require 3 hits to kill. And each hit reduces the attack and defense value by 2. Now, at first I thought, well, man, each hit reducing it by 2 kind of really sucks. But then I realized, with the exception of coastal subs, so we'll take them off the table, and with the other exception of the torpedo boat destroyers, the cheapest naval unit you can get is the, and then some of the expansions have some exceptions, like maybe the Corvette for Canada and things like that. But the cheapest naval unit that you can get or start the game with are the torpedo boat destroyers, and they're 2-2. So we all basically know that they're basically just waiting to absorb hits in a naval combat. They're not that good, and obviously you can't build them anymore. So they just absorb hits early on in the game. Well, aside from them, the cheapest naval unit you can buy is a destroyer, and that costs. I don't have the cost right in front of me. A regular destroyer costs 7. And if it gets destroyed, it's a 4-4 in combat. So actually, taking those hits on a heavy battleship is basically the equivalent of basically having two extra torpedo boat destroyers in that combat to absorb hits. So it's actually really good when you think about it like that. And then you don't pay to build them again. You just you just move your heavy battleship, assuming it survives, into someplace it can be repaired, and then it just gets repaired. So in that sense, the defense value, reducing attack and defense by 2 each hit, is really good soak off. Really inexpensive soak off when you think about it. And so I kind of reevaluated my opinion of heavy battleships and battleships in general when I started to think about it like that. Heavy carrier, not a whole lot to be said about it, that it can carry 3 fighters and tactical bombers. Who's going to complain about that? Now, I think the most interesting addition is the attack transports. No double casualties, and any land unit may attack on run round of combat from an attack transport. So your vehicle class units and artillery class units can come off with your infantry. So again, if you're doing a lot of amphibious assaulting, this is probably worth your while. And obviously there are nations right off the top of your head that pop up that go, oh yeah, well, they would definitely want to use that. So, but like I said, I'll go into the details of some of that stuff when I talk about the individual nations. I just kind of wanted to touch base with the tech chart right now in general and talk about how I felt about the basics. And now I didn't go into how much the roll number is. Like some of them are obviously harder to get, like strategic bombers are some of the hardest, strategic rockets are some of the hardest, and so on and so forth. But other than those 2, everything else is very reasonable because everyone else is basically a 50-50. So that's pretty good. And the fact that you can research up to level 2 now before a certain date and then just kind of continue really means that a lot of this tech will come into play. Really, it will. This version of the game, I'm so happy that they redesigned tech the way they did with the free rolls based on your major factories, because it means tech matters. Tech will come into play in just about every game you play somehow, some way or another. And I really like that because obviously World War II, historically, technology was a big deal. It was a very big deal. And just look at what the Germans pulled off. I mean, when they started the war, their tech was really amazing. And it just got, they were good to start with, but then as the war went on, the fact that they were able to get to the level they did, their tech improvement basically just shot right up really quick as the war went on. And a lot of historians I've heard argue is that's one of the most impressive things about Germany during the war is they were prosecuting this major war and still making, at the same time, had the resources to make these vast improvements to their tanks and their aircraft as the war went on. That were really impressive and really outdid pretty much most of their enemies. But obviously there were other problems going on there. They didn't have the support structure necessarily to take advantage of all that tech that they developed. They also probably would have been better off not developing as much advanced tech as they did and just focusing on building more of the good stuff that they already had. And I've heard that analyzed as well, but that's a whole nother video, a whole nother story. So anyway, like I said, this is the start of a series, Tech Talk, where I want to go into each nation and what techs are good for them and why. And I want to look at a few things that I've noticed since kind of messing around with 3rd edition and again, changing kind of how I feel about why certain nations want to go for certain tech. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for now. This is Wintermute from the Think Tank, and I'll talk to you later this week.